Can men get pregnant?
Again, the reason I paused there is I'm not really sure what the goal of the question is.
The goal is just to establish a biological reality. You just said a moment ago that science and evidence should control, not politics.
Absolutely.
So let's just test that proposition. Can men get pregnant?
I take care of people with many identities.
Do science and evidence tell us that men can get pregnant? Biological men, can they get pregnant?
I also think yes/no questions like this are a political tool. And
no, yes/no questions are about the truth.
Democrats around the country struggling or just flat out refusing to address the issue of transgender issue.
Axios sat down with 20 different 2028 Democrat hopefuls recently and asked a simple question: can a man become a woman? And it went about as well as you would expect.
Only 3 answered the question: Governor Josh Shapiro, Pete Buttigieg, and Rahm Emanuel responded, and even then they kind of dodged the simple question: can a man become a woman?
Joining us now, Seattle radio host Jason Rantz. Okay, so Jason, this seems like it could become the question that completely derails Democrats in I don't know how many of the next elections, because it is such a salient way to describe whether someone lives in reality or they don't. What do you think?
So I'm kind of 2 minds on this, because I think the instinct of a lot of these Democrat hopefuls to completely ignore this is probably right in the context of, to your point, most people look at this and say, well, of course there's a difference between a man and a woman. Of course biology matters. And it's not going to likely be the biggest issue headed into that election. It's going to be about affordability. So trying to completely avoid it is wise, because they don't want to go on record saying something so deeply unpopular and stupid. However, it is a failed strategy, because they're going to be asked this, not necessarily by media, because left-wing media is not going to use this as an issue. They're going to be demanded of an answer from left-wing activists who demand that you take a very specific position on this. And it's the activists within the Democratic Party, the progressive base, who are going to push really, really hard on this to get them to get on the record. And that ultimately will be used to harm their campaigns.
And they want these Democrats, these left-wing activists, members of the liberal looniverse, as I call it, lunatic or loon, L-O-O-N, however you'd like to spell it. They want them to say that biological men should be allowed to play against girls in sport. That's really, because that's the line that they've drawn today, because they will settle at nothing. Well, they also want the government funding of surgeries on children and use of hormones on children to prevent their development.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they want people to pretend that there's no difference whatsoever based on biology, that a man is a woman can become a man can become a woman biologically, not merely identify. And it's interesting how this whole conversation has shifted over the course of the last several years. It used to be acceptable on the left to simply say someone identifies as a gender that they're not born into. Someone is a transgender female, but now they're like, trans females are females, which doesn't make any sense, because if trans women were women, you would just say women. And I think they're now picking up on that. So they're just saying women, and they're pretending that all of the distinctions that biology dictates just doesn't actually exist anymore. And it shows them to be completely unserious. And this is how they lose on this particular issue. Their own side does not offer them even some nuanced positions. Like you can ask this question of any of those candidates, and they can answer probably to the satisfactory of most Democrats, which is, no, a man can't become a woman but can identify as a woman, which is objectively true. There are men who identify as women. It doesn't make them women, and they just refuse to accept that basic fact.
Jason, this is so confusing to me. I mean, when you it's like it's not confusing, and yet the leftists make it so confusing. I just think that Americans want some straight answers on some honest things, like, can my doctor take care of me? Do they believe in reality? Can I pay for what I need? It's just not that hard. And you've got to make it complicated, Jason, in order to somehow try to fool people. I just think Americans are smarter than that.
Yeah. I think they are too. I think most Americans, regardless of how they're identifying politically, look at this as a matter of let's be respectful of people, but we're not going to change reality and we're not going to pretend reality doesn't exist. We're not going to claw back women's rights so that biological men can have an advantage.
Yeah, I've been in a seminar that is forced on corporations here in New York City where there was a video played that was an entire piece of it was that gender is assigned at birth and portraying doctors and parents as evildoers because they assign the gender of children at birth. And I'm like looking around the room like, raising my hand, and I'm like, I don't know. I was like, is anybody, and this is a video put together by the mayor's office.
Oh, of course.
Did you not?
Yeah.
Jason Rantz,
Right.
great to see you.